Peadar, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you. How are you getting on?
Good. Peadar, it does look like the government are under a huge amount of pressure in relation to this legislation, which is being kicked down the road, God knows how many times at this stage, and is really unpopular with the general public, both people on the left and people on the right.
Yeah, well, it is incredible that we had a situation that just less than a year ago, the government U-turned on the hate speech laws. At the time, Aintree was the only political party who was fully opposed to those censorship laws. And the reason why the government U-turned on it is because they knew it was going to cost them votes. They knew that there was a kind of a building up of public pressure. People were angry at the idea that you could be put in jail for saying something, or that you could be put in jail even for thinking something. We've always held the view that the engine of a functioning democracy is the competition of ideas. Ideas should be able to compete freely. The best ideas percolate to the top. People see the best ideas and they become public policy. If you shut up a side of any public debate, well, then you're going to have massive swings in ideology over time, because people will not be able to hear the truth. Ideas won't be challenged. They won't be tested. They won't be, measured. So we need to have people have to have the right to be able to speak. Now, it is incredible what's happened, because most people thought that we had made it through to the other side, that we had, successfully beaten these hate speech laws. But it looks like now the EU are going to enforce them. And I think that there's an irony here, okay, because parties like Labour Party, People Before Profit, and Soc Dems, they all supported the hate speech laws. But now what we're seeing in Europe is that people maybe who are supporting of the Palestinian side in that conflict in Gaza, they're having their protests broken up by the police in Germany violently, because Germany has a far different view in relation to Palestine. Even in Amsterdam, students are being jailed because they're protesting in support of Palestine and what's happening in relation to Gaza. And the interesting thing is that Ireland has a significantly different position in relation to Palestine than most of Europe has.
I've noticed that. It seems it's not all right to be racist, but it's all right to be anti-Semitic.
But I think that the interesting thing here is, for the likes of the Labour Party and the Soc Dems and People Before Profit, is some people in the European Union will consider their speech in relation to Palestine as hate speech. And these parties and the government were actually promoting hate speech laws just 10 months ago. So, I think this proves that, hate speech are wrong, because no matter what side of the debate you're on, you should have the ability to articulate your views in relation to any idea.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of this. The left and the right should, but if that's what we want to refer to them, or label people as who have opposing views, I think we're fighting for both, really. They should, I mean, look, there's
they should be.
People on the left put stuff up that I absolutely, people put stuff up from the left, which some of it's vile, and I completely disagree with it. But I do, and I will stand up for the right to be able to say it. Now, if you say something that's absolutely horrible or hate-filled, well, in saying that, society will come down on you. You will have to take personal responsibility for what you say. And that happens on a regular basis, where people are pulled out or they're piled on or whatever it happens to be for what they say. So society already, has a go at people, or makes people responsible for their words and what they say. But the idea that we'd be criminalised, and Helen McEntee talked about this, and there's no clear distinction of what the word hate, no more than we understand what the word love means either. But there's no clear distinction of what it is. And she said, but that would be up to the court to decide. And I'm thinking, so some guy or girl puts something up online, which they claim to be an opinion. Somebody takes offence, goes to the guards, reports them, and all of a sudden there's a court case. They might have to wait a year to get to court. Their life is ruined in that time. And she said it'll be up to a judge and a jury to decide whether that's hate. But realistically, that person's life is ruined. So what it's going to do is create what they call a chilling effect on speech. Yes, so people are going to think twice about putting their opinions, be they left or right, up online, just in case they happen to fall foul of this piece of legislation.
Yes. So there's two things there. First of all, one of the saddest things I often see in Leinster House and in the political spectrum in Ireland is political parties shouting for their own freedom of speech, but against the freedom of speech of those who oppose them. So we believe, in that Voltaire attitude that even if I might disagree with you 100%, I fight for your right to say. And I think that needs to be a baseline in a functioning democracy, first and foremost. Secondly, we do have this idea where the government said, well, this is not going to be imposed here, there, and elsewhere. But the truth of the matter is, it would create a chilling effect, because, first of all, even the threat of you being investigated, even the threat of the Garda coming to your door, even those situations are going to make people think 2 and 3 times before they actually say a particular sentence. And remember that massive debacle that happened about 2 years ago on the Joe Duffy show, where ordinary women went on the show and said that a man can't get pregnant, that a woman should be able to play sports with other women and not have other men in those sports, that women had the right to safe spaces, women-only spaces, that children in schools should be educated on the basis of science and not on gender ideology. And within 2 or 3 days, a massive kerfuffle, a big push from the woke brigade in this country tried to shut down the Joe Duffy show, stop it actually from speaking whatsoever.
Oh, so they wanted to call before the Oireachtas committee and everything. There were all sorts of carry on.
Yeah, it was incredible. It was a form of cultural censorship. So they didn't have the law on their side, but they pulled all the cultural levers they could to shut down the system. And even, a lot of the opposition parties in Leinster House tried to shut down their debate as well. And so, and that's the big problem in this country. There's taboos now that people can't even speak about, can't even challenge the system on, because there is a cultural enforcement of, censorship and of woke politics in Ireland. The solution to that is for people to be able to articulate and have the confidence to be able to engage and challenge and test. But the worry I have at the moment is now here we have the EU. They've given the Irish government two months to come back to their diktat. The 2 months is up on the 7th of July. If the government doesn't respond by the 7th of July, they're going to bring the Irish government to court. If they're successful in the court, they could then start fining the Irish government in terms of not complying with their diktat. And you could see millions of euros, tens of millions, potentially hundreds of millions of euros being fined on Ireland because we refuse to conform to a European attitude towards censorship. But
this is the same legislation coming from Europe that Cynthia Nimurku, who was elected as a member of the European Parliament, she was defending this legislation and believed that Ireland should bring it in because she was talking about the European legislation when it comes to speech laws. But I mean, here's the thing. So where are we now? Because, look, I think Jim O'Callaghan has a very different view to Helen McEntee when it comes to hate speech laws. I think he will defend Ireland, and I would like to think he would anyway. But he's not going to have the final say. Micheál Martin is. And Micheál Martin the other day only guaranteed an NGO, the National LGBT Federation, that we will be updating the laws, that we will be bringing in these laws, that we will be, dealing with Europe and making some sort of sacrifices here. That's what it suggests, certainly in this video, of an NGO. I mean, and it is just NGOs that are pushing this. It's a small amount of people with a very loud voice, a funded voice, can I just point out as well, who are demanding that this legislation be brought in.
Yeah, no, listen, there's no doubt that the political movement in relation to bringing about censorship in Ireland is very organised. They're very well funded. But the truth is, there's not that many of them, and they're not representative of the Irish people. And sometimes, we look at the world around us, and we see the country nearly dressed up in the colours of these organisations, and we think that we're nearly a minority. And we listen to the radio and the television, and we think we don't hear our own voices, and we think we're a minority. And we read the papers, and we don't see our opinions in the papers. And again, we think we're a minority, and that also has a chilling effect in people being able to speak up. I know people who tell me, God, Peadar, I don't know if I could say that because, people wouldn't agree with me. And I'm thinking, actually, probably everybody in that room would agree with you if you did speak up. Like, listen to this. I remember being in a studio in Virgin Media about a year and a half ago, and I was going on a show with a Fine Gael minister. At the same time, in the RTE studio, Graham Linehan was appearing.
The comedian,
the comedian, and he was campaigning for women's rights, and he said, that, again, that simple scientific statement that a man can't get pregnant. And Labour youth were outside protesting, protesting that he shouldn't be even allowed to speak in that studio in those terms. And I turned around to the Fine Gael minister out in the other studio, and I said, surely you do not believe in that protest, and surely you think it's incredible that a person can't even say something as logical and as scientific as that a man can't get pregnant. And the Fine Gael minister, who's very well paid, decades of experience in politics, he said to me, I fully agree with you, Peadar. And I said, well, why don't you say it? And he says, you can't say it because you get the head taken off you for saying it by the media. And I'm thinking, if this guy who's well paid, who's senior, who's got a tough neck from his years in politics, is afraid to even speak up such basic logic, well, then how is your ordinary citizen?
Yeah, but we've seen that. Even when Owen O'Brien was asked outside the Dáil one day, there was a video going around of Owen O'Brien being asked, what is a woman? And he stood there like with a vacant face on him, afraid to answer the question. And I think eventually came up with some line that whoever wants to be a woman or whatever. I don't know what the line was.
Yeah.
But he struggled. And the same way as if I asked every minister in the Dáil tomorrow and I interviewed them one by one and asked them what is a woman, I can guarantee you that 80% of them would be terrified to tell the truth because they're afraid of upsetting people.
I would say 80% of them will know what the right answer is, but they'll be afraid to tell the truth. And it's a mental thing that in a democracy, they're not afraid of the general public, their masters, their voters, the electorate. They're afraid of that small cohort of NGOs and media activists who will literally come down on it like a ton of bricks on them. So what I would say to the electorate is, if you want a politician who has the backbone to be able to stand up in the chamber and be able to say that a woman is a female adult and the man can't get pregnant and give birth to a child, well, then you need to be able to prioritize candidates who are confident enough to say that in elections so that they're the people who are representing you. We cannot have a political class who's afraid of the NGO media class.
Okay, finally, because I know you're speaking in the Dáil in 5 minutes' time, so I don't want to keep you too long. Just in relation to this, whose final say is this going to be? It is going to be Micheál Martin. It's not going to be Jim O'Callaghan, is it? Even though he is the Minister for Justice. It is going to be Micheál Martin. And if, judging by what he said yesterday, he's going to satisfy the European Union.
Yeah, I'll say that I think there's going to be a battle in Fine Gael or in Fianna Fáil in relation to this. I think that Micheál Martin may have the upper hand in relation to this, but there's no doubt if you like, what's actually happening currently as well is a battle over the future of Fianna Fáil and the future leadership over Fianna Fáil. And in fairness, I think that Jim O'Callaghan is probably trying to differentiate himself slightly from that woke element that Fianna Fáil has become over the last 10 years, in an effort, I think, to progress his career in relation to Fianna Fáil. So, maybe he'll stand up to Micheál on this. I don't know, but we'll be putting pressure both in the channels. We've already raised it in the channel yesterday. We've raised it in the media on Wednesday, and we'll be making sure that we use every tool we can to highlight the inconsistencies of the government on this and to make sure that every citizen has a democratic right to articulate on issues of real importance in terms of public policy.
Peadar Tóibín, leader of Aon. Listen, thank you very much indeed, and good luck today in the Dáil. All right.